Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're doing a owner's review slash experience slash post-mortem of Gloomhaven. Now, why Gloomhaven and not Frosthaven, I hear you ask? Well, the answer is very simple. We still haven't finished Gloomhaven, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this style of a review rather than a standard traditional formal review of the game. So with no further ado, let's do a quick summation of what Gloomhaven is, and I'll give my take on what it has been like as a Gloomhaven owner for the past few years. Gloomhaven is a dungeon crawler RPG of epic proportions, where players go through multiple characters in the lifetime of both the game and the story. The combat is card-based, where each card has a top or bottom option, only one of which can be played in a combat turn and must be combined with a second card using the opposite option. Once cards are played, they are discarded, and then when players draw a new hand, they rest and draw a new hand minus one of the cards. If players are badly hit, they can also discard a card. When players can no longer play two cards on their turn, the character is exhausted and can no longer play the dungeon. If all characters are exhausted, the game is over and the dungeon is lost. There are 95 unique playable scenarios or dungeons in this game, and that is not counting random dungeons that you can generate. There are 17 playable classes, there are multiple character goal scenarios, multiple difficulty levels, and an overarching story that is fed and enriched by the player's progression through the quests and what choices they make during the game. The game is called Gloomhaven because that is the name of the city itself that your adventurers base themselves in, and it develops as your characters develop, with additions made to the shop and to the lore, as well as new ways to modify your items and spells that I won't elaborate on for fear of narrative spoilers. Gloomhaven is also a legacy game, which means that it uses the function of trashing cards and the use of one-time only stickers to permanently affect the board and player cards. You can, however, purchase and use a reusable sticker set to preserve the game and simply store the discarded cards rather than tear them up. However, given the sheer depth of the game, it'd be rare that you get multiple playthroughs of the same board game, especially now that it has a succession of sequels and expansions such as Frosthaven, Jaws of the Lion, Forgotten Circles, and the Solo Quests pack. There's also a very competent, stylish, and well-developed Gloomhaven computer game that facilitates multiplayer that allows people who can't meet regularly to play together. However, it omits certain small parts from the game, such as the discovery of a secret character. Nevertheless, it remains a very viable option for people who want to play Gloomhaven without the massive administration and bookkeeping of the board game that comes with it, and is a viable alternative to having to store and play this massive behemoth of a board game on your board game shelf. One final thing I wish to say by way of introduction before I move on is the fact that this game was listed as the #1 game on Board Game Geek for 5 years and 2 months. An astounding record that has never been, nor I suspect ever will be matched, and is a record that this game thoroughly deserves, as it is, in my view, the Ulysses by James Joyce of board games. An incredible achievement and a massive labour of love by Isaac Childers, whose scope of vision simply blew away anything that came before it, and remains, to this day, a significant milestone in board game history. So, as for personal experience, well, like everyone else, I had bought into the hype, listening with amazement as everyone utterly raved about the game, and watched a succession of professional board game reviewers struggle to actively articulate the scope and depth of a game that had never been experienced before in a board game format, astounded that something as big as this could actually exist. The board game club I founded in my local bar was thriving, and I was constantly on the lookout for fresh games to play with my new circle of friends. As the club was still relatively young, we had a limited pool of games to play with, and Gloomhaven seemed like the answer to my prayers. A substantive game that would allow us to play regularly without having to cram in new rules every single game session in the local bar. I had hyped my friends, raving about this game, and asked them to keep an eye out for me in case it popped up in any of the local friendly gaming stores. Living in Ireland, I did not initially garner much hope, but nevertheless I had multiple eyes looking out for a copy for me. And then I found it. In my local gaming store, no less. I was with my fiancée at the time and was suitably poor from having purchased her engagement ring, so the budget wasn't looking good. However, because she had heard me mention the words Gloomhaven, 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 Gloomhaven over and over again to various friends, she relented and let me dip into the wedding fund to impulse purchase the game. Having brought my prize home and after catching my breath, I decided to record the unboxing and show it to my friends via Messenger. It took me an hour and a half to unbox it, and longer again to sort it. I was utterly unprepared for the sheer amount of stuff in this and the crazy amount of sorting it took. I had raided the cupboard for freezer bags to keep and sort the tokens, as this game was insanely huge. I googled online for the reusable sticker set and had it delivered. Indeed, the Gloomhaven reusable sticker set was one of the very first videos of this channel, and we set about organising the campaign I was going to wage with my friends. And this is where I encountered my first problem. The game was a maximum of 4 players. Gloomhaven being Gloomhaven, there was significant hype surrounding it, and everyone wanted to try it. So I was initially put into the position of having to ensure that there was no hurt feelings amongst the circle of friends who couldn't join in. And those who did commit to this epic 95 scenario adventure could not only do so, but were also willing to meet on a regular basis and almost exclusively just play this game. The other issue was that this was not a game that could be played in the local bar. It was much too big and cumbersome and took way too long to set up. The risk of losing pieces to carelessness or the odd spilled pint was also too great, so I ended up having to host the game at my home, which was great as far as I was concerned, as it meant a second weekly board game night, but was a source of annoyance for my fiancée as she was now a board game widow twice weekly rather than just once a week. The game, duly set up and a party of adventurers psyched, we started to play, which is where more of the problematic logistics came into play. The thing was not only a table hog, it took ages to set up and ages to put away, and this meant that the kitchen table was out of bounds for at least one evening a week, and in some cases the following morning if the scenario we played went on for too long. It also meant that we only managed to play one scenario at night, and that became frustrating if we lost the scenario and had to replay it again the next time we met. As we played regularly, a couple of things happened. My friends gifted me with a storage solution which sped up the administration of the game significantly, as I was not storing all my pieces in freezers and sandwich bags anymore. And we made a discovery. Now there's a small spoiler here, but not a significant one, and I won't overly elaborate on it. However, if you do want to skip the video to be safe, skip forward to the time listed below by James now and you'll avoid it. Ready? As we emptied the box to slot all the components into the new storage solution, we discovered a secret envelope with the letter X. There are coded instructions to the envelope that you have to decipher, and a journey of its own to uncover with the initial clues given to you by the box. I won't elaborate further, as Isaac Childers asked the community to not spoil it for people, but what I will tell you is that the journey is worth it, and the reward is significant. This was the first catalyst in the game that moved Gloomhaven from being a great game to something truly special. It's hard to accurately describe the moment, but it was a unique shared experience we did not expect, and it instantly elevated our desire to play and discover this game to a new frenzy. We had an extra late gaming session that night, as we spent most of the first half of the evening deciphering the message and pondering about what it meant before moving on to the established scenario. With the new organisational system, setup and teardown became so much more efficient that we now managed 2 scenarios a night. I cannot envision playing this game without it, and I recommend that anyone who does indeed own this game to invest in one, as the labour and time saved with an organisational system cannot be understated. Indeed, it allowed us to tear through the game with renewed vigour, as scenarios could be completed, and in a particularly interesting quest line or 2, we even pushed the odd night to 3 scenarios, buzzing with story plots, lore developments, and some incredible enemies that we managed to best by only the barest of margins. The rota of characters on offer and the discovery of a brand new combat and playstyle with each new unlocked figure kept the game fresh and exciting, and we adored meeting old and beloved retired characters in random encounters as we progressed through the story. We knew we were playing something special, and the shared experiences we were having were becoming seared into our memories as our story as a group and our secondary lives in the city of Gloomhaven developed. Then we ran into our next problem: logistics. Life being life, there were weeks where we couldn't meet because of illness, family commitments, holidays, etc. And out of loyalty to each other, we wouldn't play unless all were present. The game is robust enough that the scenarios can be played and difficulty adjusted to accommodate missing players or even a solitary player, but it's something we never opted for. The main reason being loyalty, but the other reason being that we needed the break. There is a world of incredible board games out there, and during the time we were playing this, we were all invested in new board games, including dungeon crawlers, but our weekly commitment to Gloomhaven meant that we never really got to play them, especially dungeon crawlers, as Gloomhaven literally ate up all available time we had together for the hobby. And there was more than one occasion where gamer fatigue had secretly set in amongst us, and nothing was mentioned to spare impacting the enthusiasm of the others. When it was finally aired that we should give Gloomhaven a break for a little bit, there was a sigh of relief among us that we had all secretly thought the same thing after playing the game so frequently for so long. We never broke from the game for long, as we did genuinely enjoy it and were thoroughly invested, but the change of pace and game allowed us to bring in other players from amongst our gaming circles for new games and host nights with more than 4 players. And Gloomhaven went from being a weekly occurrence to a bi-monthly one to eventually a monthly one, especially as the Lucky Roll channel meant that we had other games to focus on for review purposes on occasion. This is not to take from the game. It's a shared experience we all love and value, but we found that it was a game that demanded significant commitment, and one that, despite our initial enthusiasms and love for the game, found hard to stick to sometimes as we made our way through the scenarios because people felt like a change now and again. The other thing that slowed down our progress is that we wanted to experience every part of the game. So that meant that every side quest was explored, every distraction was indulged, and any chance to delay the main quest was taken to make the experience last that little bit longer. Then COVID-19 happened. As you can imagine, this put the hiatus on a great many things, and not just board games. The Lucky Roll became difficult to provide weekly content for, as no one was available to meet to play new games. My government job meant that I was listed as an essential worker throughout the pandemic, and my workload increased tenfold throughout it for reasons that I cannot go into. Post the pandemic, the board game club I had founded was pretty much decimated, as members had moved on with their lives, and people wanted a more active lifestyle after a forced year of a sedentary one. Further compounded by my workload in my regular job, which afforded me less time to invest in the reinvigoration of the club. Today, thankfully, things are different and the club is once again thriving. However, the lean period meant that we couldn't solve a new problem that we didn't account for in our Gloomhaven experience. Friends no longer being friends, and having to replace one of our players. I won't elaborate, but people being people, things happen. People fall out with each other and social circles change. One of the core members of our group had moved on, and we were left with the prospect of replacing one of our members with someone new who had to slot into a game that was 3/4 of the way completed. To their credit, they played and enjoyed the experience, but it wasn't the same. They didn't have the same investment in the game, nor the same history with it that the remainder of us did, and something magical about the way we played Gloomhaven was lost. To quote Tolkien, the fellowship was broken and never to be whole again. As it stands, we're only 2 scenarios away from completion of the game, but we haven't mustered the enthusiasm to play it. Another of our core members is a father, and of all of us, his time is the most precious. So when it comes to gaming together, we tend to opt for a variety of games rather than just the familiar confines of Gloomhaven. We have Frosthaven waiting in the wings and ready to go, and our newly acquired fellowship member is all set to experience the fresh journey with us, but we keep putting it off. There are, as it stands, too many games in our backlog to play, and other games that I want to review. There are other dungeon crawlers and legacy games that we have effectively cheated on Gloomhaven with, such as Cthulhu Death May Die and Clank Legacy. Streamlined experiences that, whilst lacking the depth of Gloomhaven, have been refreshing and fun to play. And it becomes harder and harder to go back to Gloomhaven the more time we spend away from it. We do intend to complete it, but I want the experience to be a joy rather than an obligation. And for the moment, the need to play it feels dutiful rather than desired. Gloomhaven is a game I will never regret buying, or a game I will ever regret playing, but it is a game that I will warn people that demands commitment. Not only in playtime, but organisation, setup, logistics, and the deprivation of other games to focus on it. Its playtime usually means that you cannot play anything else that night, and its vast range of scenarios to play means that you will not complete it quickly. If you only buy one game a year, then Gloomhaven and its more modern equivalents and expansions are definitely a prime choice I'd recommend to you. If, however, you have a backlog of games or cannot dedicate a regular slot in your week to devote to it, then it's a game that you may never complete and end up regretting not being able to do so. It demands commitment, and you need to ask yourself if you can manage that before you buy into it. As always, this is Sean. If you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and until next time, this is Sean, signing off.